Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Liberty's Edge, watching the stars streak past through the main window. His ship was small compared to the massive council vessels, but it was fast and reliable. Jake had been commanding this frigate for 3 years, patrolling the outer rim where human colonies spread across dozens of worlds. "Captain, we're getting a distress signal," said Lieutenant Lisa Carter from her station. She was young but sharp, one of the best tactical officers Jake had ever worked with. Her fingers moved quickly across the control panel as she tried to clean up the transmission. "Put it through," Jake ordered, settling into his command chair. The bridge crew turned their attention to the main screen as static filled the speakers. "This is New Haven Colony calling any human ships in the area. We need immediate help. Council forces are attacking our settlement. They're forcing families from their homes. Please, if anyone can hear this. We have children here." The desperation in the voice made Jake's stomach turn. He looked at his crew. Chief Engineer Pete Hamilton had come up from the engine room when he heard the alert. Communications Officer Amy Rodriguez was already working to trace the signal's origin. "Amy, how far to New Haven?" Jake asked. 2 hours at maximum speed, Captain," she replied, her voice tight with concern. Jake didn't hesitate. "Pete, give me everything the engines can handle. Lisa, prepare all weapon systems but keep them powered down. We don't want to start a fight. We can't finish." The Liberty's Edge changed course, pushing its engines to the limit. Jake had heard rumors about Council forces putting pressure on human colonies, but he'd never seen it firsthand. The Galactic Council was supposed to maintain peace between the different species, not attack innocent settlers. As they approached New Haven, Jake could see the problem immediately. 3 large Council enforcement ships hung in orbit around the green planet. Their dark hulls were marked with the Council's symbol, a circle of 12 points representing the ruling species. On the planet's surface, Jake could see smoke rising from several locations. "Captain, we're being hailed by the lead Council ship," Amy reported. "On screen," Jake said, straightening his uniform. The face that appeared on the main screen belonged to High Arbiter Zeth Kalar, a tall alien with gray skin and cold black eyes. The Vorthan species had been part of the Council for centuries, and they were known for their ruthless efficiency. "Human vessel, you will leave this system immediately," Zeth Kalar said, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "This is Council business." "I'm Captain Morrison of the human frigate Liberty's Edge," Jake replied, keeping his voice steady. "We received a distress call from the colony below. What's the nature of your operation here?" Zeth Kalar's expression didn't change. "The human settlement on this world is illegal. These colonists are occupying territory that belongs to the Sindathi Empire under Treaty 847B, signed 200 years before humans even left their home system. They must be relocated." Jake felt his jaw tighten. "Relocated where? These people have been farming this land for 15 years. They have homes, schools, families." "That is not the Council's concern," the High Arbiter replied coldly. "Humans are a young species. You must learn to respect the ancient claims of your betters. These colonists will be processed at Station Kepler 7 until proper housing can be arranged." Jake knew about Station Kepler 7. It was an overcrowded processing facility where conditions were barely survivable. Families were separated, and many people who went there were never seen again. "High Arbiter, I request permission to speak with the colony leaders before any action is taken," Jake said, trying to buy time. Zeth Kalar's laugh was harsh. "You request nothing, Captain. You are here by our tolerance only. Leave now or face the consequences." The transmission ended, leaving Jake staring at a blank screen. He turned to Lisa. "What's our tactical situation?" 3 Council enforcement. "Cruisers, each twice our size," she reported grimly. "We're outgunned, but we're faster. If we need to run, we can probably make it." Jake nodded, but running was the last thing on his mind. "Amy, can you get me a direct line to the colony?" Within minutes, Jake was speaking to Martin Webb, the elected leader of New Haven. Webb was a middle-aged farmer who had brought his family to this world seeking a better life. His voice shook as he described what was happening. "They came without warning, Captain. Said we had one day to pack our things and report to the transport ships. When we tried to explain that this is our home, they started destroying buildings. They hit the school first, said it was to make an example. Jake closed his eyes. Are there casualties? Not yet, but they're getting rougher. My wife, Helen, is trying to keep the children calm, but they're scared. We all are. These council soldiers, they look at us like we're nothing, like we're bugs to be swept away. Hold tight, Martin. I'm going to try to work something out. Jake cut the transmission and turned to his crew. They were all looking at him, waiting for orders. He knew what he should do according to regulations. The council had authority over interspecies disputes. His job was to patrol and protect, not to interfere with official council business. But, as he watched the tactical display, he saw council shuttles moving between the planet and their ships. Each shuttle was packed with human colonists being forced from their homes. On the surface, more buildings were being destroyed. Captain, Amy said quietly, I'm picking up another transmission from the surface. The voice that came through the speakers was Martin Webb's, but it was different now. Desperate, angry. Please, we're not resisting. We just want to take our children's belongings. My daughter's toy, she's only 5 years old. Please don't destroy everything we've built. Then came another voice, cold and mechanical through a translator. You will take nothing. You will report to the transport immediately or face punishment. I'm not resisting, I'm just asking. The sound that followed made Jake's blood run cold. An energy weapon discharge, followed by screams. Then Martin Webb's voice, but weaker now, in pain. Helen, take the children and run. Don't let them see this. Martin, someone help him, please. Jake was on his feet before he realized it. Lisa, target the council shuttles on the surface. Pete, reroute all power to weapons and shields. Captain, Lisa said carefully, if we fire on council forces, we'll be branded as rebels. There's no going back. Jake looked at his crew. Amy was pale but determined. Pete had his hand on the power controls, ready. Lisa's finger hovered over the weapons console. That man down there has a wife and children, Jake said quietly. They came to this world to build something better. They're not soldiers or criminals. They're farmers, and the council is treating them like animals. He looked at the tactical display again. More shuttles were loading colonists. On the surface, fires were spreading through the settlement. They want to teach us our place, Jake continued, his voice growing harder. They want us to bow down and accept that human lives don't matter, that our families, our children, our hopes and dreams are all worthless because we're young and they're old. Jake walked to the weapons console and put his hand next to Lisa's. I won't let that stand. Not today, not ever. Together, they pressed the firing controls. The Liberty's Edge shuddered as her weapons fired. Energy beams lanced down toward the planet, striking the council shuttles on the surface. Explosions bloomed in the colony as the attack ships were destroyed. All council vessels. This is Captain Morrison, Jake announced over the communications system. Leave this system immediately or face the consequences. High Arbiter Zethkalar's face appeared on screen again. His cold composure finally cracked. You have just declared war on the Galactic Council, human. Your species will pay for this act of rebellion. My species? Jake smiled grimly. No, High Arbiter. This is just one captain who got tired of watching bullies pick on innocent people. The council ships opened fire and Jake Morrison's war began. 3 weeks after the battle at New Haven, Jake Morrison was the most wanted man in the galaxy. His face appeared on wanted posters across every council-controlled system. The bounty on his head was enough to buy a small planet. The Liberty's Edge drifted silently through the Kepler 442 asteroid field, hidden among the floating rocks that had once been a mining operation. Jake stood in the ship's small meeting room, looking at the faces gathered around the table. His crew had stayed with him, even though it meant they were all now fugitives. The council has put blockades around 12 human colonies, reported Amy Rodriguez, reading from her datapad. They're searching every ship that comes and goes. Trade has almost stopped completely. Lisa Carter nodded grimly. They're making an example of us. Show the galaxy what happens when you stand up to the council. Pete Hamilton leaned back in his chair. Problem is, Captain, we can't fight the whole council with one ship. We need help. Jake had been thinking the same thing. The Council had thousands of ships, dozens of member species, and resources beyond counting. One rebel frigate couldn't change anything alone. "We're not alone," said a new voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Commander Frank Torres walking into the room. He was a tall man with graying hair and the bearing of a career military officer. Jake recognized him immediately. Torres had been a high-ranking advisor in the Council's military division. "Commander Torres," Jake said carefully. "What brings a Council officer to my rebel hideout?" Torres sat down at the table uninvited. "Former Council officer. I resigned 3 days ago after I saw what they did to the farming colony on Centauri 7. Burned the whole settlement from orbit. Said it was to prevent the spread of rebellion." The room fell silent. Jake felt his stomach turn. How many people? 40,000. Men, women, children, all dead because the Council wanted to send a message. Torres looked directly at Jake. "Your message at New Haven has been heard, Captain. But so has theirs. The question is, what do we do about it?" Over the next hour, Torres explained what he knew about Council operations. As a military advisor, he had access to fleet movements, supply lines, and strategic planning. The information he shared painted a picture of an empire built on fear and maintained through overwhelming force. "The Council's strength comes from division," Torres said. "They keep all the member species separated, competing against each other for favor. But there are cracks in that system. Species that hate the Council but have never had a reason to work together." Jake leaned forward. "What kind of species?" "The Kraleks, for one. Reptilian race from the Vega system. The Council annexed their homeworld 50 years ago, claimed it was for their own protection. The Kraleks have been fighting a guerrilla war ever since, but they're too proud to ask for help." Amy looked up from her notes. "What about the Hive Collective? I've heard rumors that the Council has been using them as slave labor." Torres nodded. "The insectoid species, highly intelligent, work as a unified mind. The Council conquered them by threatening to destroy their queenships. Now they're forced to build Council infrastructure across the galaxy. They hate their masters but see no way to rebel." Jake stood up and walked to the small window, looking out at the asteroid field. 3 weeks ago, he had been a simple patrol, captain following orders. Now he was planning a rebellion against the most powerful government in the galaxy. "How do we contact these species?" he asked. "Carefully," Torres replied. "The Council monitors all official communication channels, but there are ways. Smugglers, merchants, independent traders, people who move between systems without much oversight." As if summoned by their conversation, Amy's communication console beeped. She checked the display and looked surprised. "Captain, we're getting a transmission from a merchant ship. They're requesting permission to dock." Jake exchanged glances with Torres. "Put them through." The face that appeared on the screen belonged to a weathered man in his 50s. He had the look of someone who had spent years moving cargo between the outer rim worlds. "Captain Morrison, I'm Roy Stevens, master of the merchant vessel Golden Star. I've got something that might interest you." "What kind of something?" Jake asked cautiously. Stevens smiled. "The kind that goes boom. I've been running weapons to human colonies for the past 2 weeks. Figured if the Council wants a fight, we might as well give them one." Within an hour, Stevens had docked with the Liberty's Edge. His cargo hold was packed with military-grade weapons, ammunition, and equipment. But more importantly, he brought information. "Word of what you did at New Haven has spread," Stevens told Jake as they walked through his ship. "Human captains across the galaxy are talking. Some are scared, but others are angry. Really angry." Stevens introduced Jake to Captain Nina Brooks via secure communication. Brooks commanded an exploration ship called the Pathfinder, and she had been gathering intelligence on Council fleet movements. "The Council is pulling ships from the outer systems to reinforce their core worlds," Brooks reported from her bridge. "They're scared, Captain Morrison. For the first time in centuries, they're actually scared." Over the following days, more ships began arriving at the asteroid hideout. Captain Danny Walsh brought his cargo hauler loaded with medical supplies. Captain Carol Martinez arrived with her passenger liner converted into a mobile command center. Each new arrival brought stories of Council brutality and human resistance. But the most important arrival came a week later. Jake was in the Liberty's Edge's engine room helping Pete with repairs when Amy's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, you need to see this. We've got a Kralex ship requesting permission to approach." Jake hurried to the bridge. On the main screen, he could see a sleek, dark vessel unlike anything in human or Council fleets. Its hull was covered in angular plates that seemed to shift and change, making it nearly invisible against the asteroids. "This is War Leader Scath of the Kralex Resistance," came a harsh reptilian voice over the communication system. "We wish to speak with the human who killed Council enforcers." The Kralex delegation that came aboard was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. Scath was tall and covered in green-black scales, with bright yellow eyes that seemed to see everything. Two other Kralex warriors accompanied him, moving with deadly grace. "Your attack on the Council ships has been noticed," Scath said, his translated voice carrying approval. "For 50 years we have fought alone. Perhaps it is time to fight together." The alliance that formed over the next several days was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Humans provided adaptability and determination. The Kralex brought advanced stealth technology and centuries of guerrilla warfare experience. Through careful negotiation, they even made contact with elements of the Hive Collective, who began secretly providing intelligence about Council operations. Jake found himself at the center of something much bigger than he had ever imagined. What had started as one captain's refusal to watch innocent people suffer was becoming a galaxy-wide resistance movement. The first joint operation came 2 weeks later. Intelligence from the Hive Collective revealed that the Council was holding thousands of political prisoners on a moon called Tartarus. Among them were humans who had spoken out against Council policies, Kralex resistance fighters, and members of other species who had dared to question the established order. "It's heavily defended," Torres warned as they planned the assault. 3. Battleships, orbital defense platforms, ground-based weapons. Jake looked at the tactical display showing their combined fleet. 15 human ships, 8 Kralex stealth fighters, and a swarm of Hive Collective support vessels. "Then we'll have to be smart about it," he said. "Hit fast, hit hard, and get out before they can respond." The assault on Tartarus would be their first real test as an alliance. If they succeeded, it would prove that the Council could be beaten. If they failed, the rebellion would die before it truly began. But Jake Morrison was no longer just a patrol captain trying to protect a colony. He was the leader of the Free Species Alliance, and he was ready for war. The assault on Tartarus Prison Moon began at dawn. Jake Morrison watched from the Liberty's Edge as 30 rebel ships dropped out of hyperspace around the heavily defended facility. The moon hung like a gray scar against the black of space, surrounded by Council defense platforms and patrol ships. "All ships, this is Morrison," Jake spoke into his communicator. "Remember the plan. Kralex fighters take out the sensors first. Human ships hit the orbital platforms. Hive Collective vessels provide electronic warfare support." The battle started with silence. The Kralex stealth ships were invisible until they opened fire, their energy beams slicing through the Council's sensor arrays like knives through paper. Suddenly blind, the defense platforms began firing randomly into space. "Now!" Jake ordered. The Liberty's Edge led the human ships in a direct assault on the orbital weapons. Lisa Carter's fingers danced across her tactical controls, sending precise shots into the platform's weak points. Explosions bloomed across the moon's orbit as one after another of the massive weapons was destroyed. But the Council wasn't defenseless. 3 battleships that had been hidden behind the moon came around its edge, their heavy guns already charging. These were massive vessels, each one bigger than Jake's entire fleet. "This is Admiral Vexus Thera of the Council Defense Force," came a cold voice over the communications channel. "Surrender now and your deaths will be quick." Jake recognized the name. Vexus Thera was known throughout the galaxy as the Council's most ruthless enforcer. She had destroyed entire planets to maintain Council authority. "This is Captain Morrison," Jake replied. "The only thing surrendering today will be your prisoners." The space battle that followed was unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. Council battleships fired massive energy beams that could cut a frigate in half. But the rebel ships were smaller and faster, darting between the giant vessels like angry wasps. Roy Stevens, in his converted merchant ship Golden Star, took a direct hit while trying to disable a battleship's engines. His ship broke apart in a ball of fire, but not before his final torpedo strike crippled his target. "Roy's down," reported Nina Brooks from the Pathfinder. Her voice was tight with grief and anger. Jake felt the loss like a physical blow. Roy had been one of the first to join their cause, risking everything to smuggle weapons to human colonies. But there was no time to mourn. The battle was still raging. The Kralix fighters proved their worth, using their stealth technology to get close to the battleships and plant explosives on their hulls. War leader Scath personally led the attack on Admiral Vexthara's flagship, his fighter dancing through defensive fire to reach the ship's command section. Meanwhile, the Hive Collective's electronic warfare was causing chaos in the Council's systems. Defense platforms turned on each other, and two battleships collided when their navigation systems were scrambled. The breakthrough came when Commander Torres, flying a captured Council shuttle, managed to reach the prison complex on the moon's surface. His team fought through automated defenses and freed the political prisoners, including someone Jake had thought was dead. "Jake Morrison, you beautiful fool," came a familiar voice over the radio. "This is Admiral Kate Sullivan. Thanks for the rescue." Jake's heart leaped. Admiral Sullivan had been his instructor at the military academy years ago. She was a legend in the human fleet, known for her tactical brilliance and unshakable courage. The Council had arrested her 6 months ago for refusing to fire on peaceful protesters. "Admiral, good to have you back," Jake replied. "Can you take command of the surface operation?" "Already on it, Captain. We've got 3,000 prisoners, free and moving to the evacuation ships. Give us 10 more minutes." But they didn't have 10 minutes. More Council ships were jumping into the system, drawn by the distress signals from Tartarus. Jake counted at least 20 new vessels, including 2 massive dreadnoughts that could probably destroy his entire fleet. "All ships, begin withdrawal," Jake ordered. "We've got what we came for." The rebel fleet fought a running battle as they retreated from Tartarus. They had won a great victory, freeing thousands of prisoners and proving that the Council could be beaten. But the cost had been high. 7 ships were lost, including Roy Stevens and his brave crew. As the surviving ships jumped to hyperspace, Jake knew that everything had changed. This wasn't just a rescue mission anymore. It was war. The news of the Tartarus raid spread across the galaxy like wildfire. On human colonies, people celebrated in the streets. Other oppressed species began to whisper that maybe the Council wasn't as all-powerful as they seemed. But the Council's response was swift and terrible. Jake was reviewing battle reports in his quarters when Amy Rodriguez burst through the door, her face pale with shock. "Captain, you need to see this. Emergency transmission from the Outer Rim." On the main screen, Jake saw a sight that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Haven's Rest, a peaceful human colony world of 8 million people, was burning. The entire planet was covered in fire, its cities reduced to ash and glass. Admiral Vexthara appeared on the screen, standing on the bridge of her flagship. Behind her, Jake could see the massive planet-killer weapons that had just murdered an entire world. "Let this be a lesson to all who would challenge the Galactic Council," Vexthara announced. "The human colony of Haven's Rest has been eliminated, as punishment for supporting rebellion. Any species that aids these terrorists will face the same fate." Jake stared at the screen in horror. 8 million people. Men, women, children, all dead because he had dared to fight back. The weight of their deaths crushed down on him like a physical force. "Captain," Lisa said quietly from behind him, "this isn't your fault, isn't it?" Jake turned to face his crew. "They're dead because I started this rebellion, because I couldn't just follow orders and look the other way." Admiral Sullivan, who had been reviewing tactical reports in the corner, stood up and walked over to Jake. Her weathered face was hard with determination. "Captain Morrison, I've spent 40 years fighting for human freedom. I've seen the Council's brutality firsthand, what they did to Haven's Rest. They've been doing to smaller groups for centuries. The only difference is that now the galaxy is watching. She pointed to the communication reports scattered across Jake's desk. Look at these messages. The Andromedan Trade Federation has declared independence from the Council. The Ethereal Communion has withdrawn their support. 12 minor species have asked to join our alliance. Jake looked at the reports with new eyes. The destruction of Haven's Rest had been intended to terrify the galaxy into submission. Instead, it had shown everyone exactly what kind of regime they were living under. They made a mistake, Admiral Sullivan continued. They showed their true face to the galaxy. Now everyone knows that the Council's peace is built on the threat of genocide. Over the following weeks, Jake's small rebellion grew into something much larger. The Free Species Alliance expanded to include dozens of races, all united by their hatred of Council tyranny. Human colonies that had been neutral declared for the rebellion. Even some Council member species began to question their loyalty. Jake found himself commanding not just a single ship, but an entire fleet. Admiral Sullivan took charge of overall strategy, while War Leader Scath coordinated with other alien resistance groups. The Hive Collective provided intelligence and electronic warfare support. The war spread across multiple star systems. Council fleets engaged rebel forces in massive space battles. Jake led raids against Council supply lines and communication centers. His name became a symbol of hope for the oppressed and terror for the Council's supporters. But Jake knew that, as long as the Council's leadership remained intact, the war would continue. Somewhere in the galaxy, 12 ancient beings called the High Arbiters ruled from the shadows, commanding the vast Council empire through fear and manipulation. The final victory would require striking at the very heart of Council power. Jake began planning the most audacious assault in galactic history, an attack on Sanctum, the hidden fortress where the High Arbiters had ruled for over 1,000 years. The fate of the galaxy would be decided in one final, desperate battle. 6 months after the destruction of Haven's Rest, Jake Morrison stood before the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Over 500 ships from 43 different species floated in formation around the hidden asteroid base. Human frigates flew alongside Kralek stealth fighters, Andromedan trade vessels converted to warships, and the massive bioships of the Hive Collective. Today we end this war, Jake announced over the fleet communication system. His voice carried to every ship, translated into dozens of languages. For too long, the galaxy has lived under the shadow of the Council's tyranny. Today, we tear down that shadow forever. The target was Sanctum, a fortress world hidden in the deep void where no stars shone. For over 1,000 years, the 12 High Arbiters had ruled the galaxy from this secret location. Even most Council officials didn't know where it was, but Admiral Sullivan had spent months piecing together clues from captured Council data. Cores and the Hive Collective had finally tracked the heavily encrypted communications that led back to the hidden world. Remember, Admiral Sullivan's voice came over the tactical channel. This isn't just about winning a battle. We're fighting for the future of every free species in the galaxy. The journey to Sanctum took 3 days through hyperspace. Jake spent the time moving between ships, talking to the crews and commanders who had joined his cause. On the Kralek's battleship Shadow Strike, War Leader Scath showed him new stealth technology that could hide entire fleets. In the Hive Collective's bioship Living Thunder, the Queen Mind explained how they had broken the Council's most secret codes. But it was on his own ship, the Liberty's Edge, that Jake felt most at home. Lisa Carter had been promoted to Admiral and now commanded her own squadron. But she had asked to stay on Jake's bridge for this final battle. Pete Hamilton had turned the small frigate into one of the most advanced ships in the fleet, and Amy Rodriguez coordinated communications for the entire alliance. When they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sanctum system, Jake was amazed by what he saw. The fortress world was massive, easily 10 times the size of Earth. Its surface was covered in defensive installations, orbital platforms, and docking bays for thousands of ships. Energy shields shimmered around the planet like soap bubbles. Sensors show over 3,000 Council ships in the system, reported Lisa from her tactical station, including 50 dreadnoughts and their entire Praetorian Guard fleet. The Praetorian Guard were the Council's elite forces, troops and ships reserved for protecting the High Arbiters themselves. Jake had never seen so many of them in one place. "All ships, begin the attack," Jake ordered. "Remember, we only get one chance at this." The battle that followed was like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. 500 rebel ships charged toward 3,000 Council defenders in a fight that would determine the fate of every living being in known space. The Council's defensive fire was overwhelming. Massive energy beams swept across space, and entire squadrons of rebel ships vanished in balls of flame. But the Alliance ships kept coming, using every advantage they had. Krallic stealth fighters appeared inside the Council's defensive lines, striking at command ships and communication centers. Hive collective bioships released swarms of fighter drones that attacked like angry insects. Human captains used tactics that the ancient Council commanders had never seen before, striking fast and hard before disappearing into the chaos of battle. Jake watched in horror as ships he knew were destroyed. Captain Danny Walsh's cargo hauler exploded while trying to break through the orbital defenses. War Leader Scath's personal fighter was hit by defensive fire as he led an assault on a Praetorian Guard dreadnought. "Scath is down," reported one of the Krallic's pilots. "The War Leader is dead." Jake felt the loss like a physical blow. Scath had been one of his closest allies, a proud warrior who had fought the Council for 50 years. But there was no time to grieve. The battle was reaching its climax. "Pete, give me everything the engines have," Jake ordered. "We're going in." The Liberty's Edge dove toward the planet's surface, dodging defensive fire and enemy fighters. Jake's plan was desperate but simple. While the fleets fought in space, he would take a small team to the planet's surface and strike directly at the high arbiters. The shuttle bay of Sanctum Station was heavily defended, but Admiral Sullivan had prepared for this. Her squadron of human destroyers punched a hole in the defenses just long enough for Jake's team to get through. Jake led 20 volunteers through the corridors of the ancient station. The architecture was unlike anything human, with walls that seemed to shift and change as they moved. But Commander Torres, who had studied Council facilities for years, guided them toward the central command chamber. They fought through automated defenses and Praetorian Guard troops. The elite soldiers were tough, but they had never faced humans, fighting for their freedom. Jake's team pressed forward, leaving a trail of destroyed defense systems behind them. The final chamber was vast, with a ceiling that stretched up into darkness. In the center, 12 ancient beings sat on thrones arranged in a circle. These were the High Arbiters, the rulers of the Galactic Council. Some looked like twisted versions of familiar species, while others were so alien that Jake couldn't even guess what they had once been. "So," spoke the largest of the Arbiters, its voice echoing strangely in the chamber. "The human pest has come to die in our presence." Jake stepped forward, his weapon ready. Around the chamber, his team spread out to cover all the exits. "I've come to end your reign of terror," Jake said simply. "The galaxy deserves better than rulers who destroy entire worlds to maintain their power." The Arbiters laughed, a sound like breaking glass and screaming metal. "You understand nothing, young human," another Arbiter said. "We have ruled for millennia because we understand what lesser species cannot. Peace requires strength, order requires fear. Without us, the galaxy would tear itself apart in endless wars." "Maybe," Jake replied, pulling out the detonator that Pete had given him. His team had placed charges throughout the station while fighting their way to this chamber. But at least they'll have the choice. The largest Arbiter's expression changed as it realized what Jake was holding. "You would destroy yourself to harm us? Your species truly is mad." "Not mad," Jake said, thinking of all the people who had died in this war. Roy Stevens, War Leader Scath, the 8 million innocents on Haven's Rest, and countless others. Just tired of bullies. He pressed the detonator. The explosion that followed could be seen from orbit. The ancient fortress station, home to the High Arbiters for over 1,000 years, cracked apart like an egg. The 12 rulers of the galaxy died in the flames. Their reign of terror finally ended. Jake's sacrifice sent shockwaves through the Council fleet. Without their master's commands, many ships simply stopped fighting. Others surrendered or fled into hyperspace. The mighty Galactic Council, which had seemed invincible just hours before, collapsed like a house of cards. Admiral Sullivan, now commanding the Alliance fleet, broadcast a message across the galaxy. The age of the High Arbiters is over. The Free Species Alliance offers a new path forward, based on cooperation rather than conquest, trade rather than tribute, and freedom rather than fear. In the years that followed, the galaxy slowly healed from centuries of council oppression. The Alliance became a true democratic federation, with representatives from every member species. Planets that had been enslaved were freed. Trade and communication flourished between worlds that had been kept apart by council policy. And in the histories that were written about the Great Liberation, they remembered Jake Morrison not as a conqueror or a warrior, but as a simple patrol captain who had refused to let innocent people suffer. His example inspired millions to stand up for what was right, proving that even the mightiest empire could fall when free beings united against tyranny. The rebel captains had indeed risen, and the Galactic Council had burned, making way for a better future among the stars.